I finally scored the World Cup tickets my fiancé, Louis, had been dying to get. I was thrilled and about to tell him the good news when I overheard his friend talking to him. Skyler turned down a design gig at Milan Fashion Week, just to be with you. And now you're giving the ticket to Monica? That's a dick move, man. Louis just chuckled, his tone dismissive. Watching it with her is boring. You know I'm used to having Monica around for every World Cup. So he had already gotten tickets, and he never planned on taking me. The realization hit me then. For the past 12 years, every single World Cup, he had been by Monica's side. Every time their team scored, she was the first person he hugged to celebrate. Back then he would coax me. Monica and I grew up together. I'm just used to it. She was around long before you were. Don't be mad, okay? Next time I promise it'll just be you and me. Suddenly, I just felt exhausted. I tore up the tickets, canceled our marriage registration scheduled for next month, packed my bags, and booked a flight back to my hometown for the very next day. This time, I was the one walking away. When Louis got home, he casually tossed a thick stack of files onto the living room coffee table. Monica says this design proposal is really important to her. Do me a favor and finish it up for her. This wasn't the first time he'd asked me to do Monica's work. In the beginning, he would give me pleading looks and whisper all sorts of high-sounding excuses. I never wanted to see him disappointed, so even though it meant pulling several all-nighters, I always agreed. Now he just expected it as a given. After he spoke, he noticed my open suitcase on the floor and frowned. Stop packing. It was Monica's birthday last month, and her only wish was for me to watch this World Cup with her. I already promised her. His tone was gentle, but there was absolutely no room for discussion. He was just informing me of the decision. I quietly shoved the documents I had prepared for our marriage registration into the very bottom of my suitcase. We had originally agreed to get married on the 9th of next month, the day after the World Cup ended. Just yesterday, I was happily talking to him about my wedding dress and our invitations. But all of that was shattered by his plan to take Monica to the World Cup. None of it matters now. Thank God I can just walk away, instead of going through a divorce. I kept my eyes down, refusing to look at him. 4 years ago, you swore that for the next World Cup, you'd only go with me. Louis's brows instantly knit together. A flash of impatience crossed his eyes. But we're getting married. We've got the rest of our lives together, right? Skyler, every time Monica comes up, you lose it. Can you stop being so sensitive? This endless jealousy is exhausting. He was always like this. He would take the time that belonged to me, give it to Monica, and if I got upset, he'd accuse me of being overly sensitive and petty. But after 12 years of compromising, I was exhausted too. I'm not stopping you. Go find Monica like you always do. I said, my face completely calm. I don't need to go with you. The tension in Louis's shoulders instantly vanished. He let out a long breath, a satisfied, I knew you'd given look washing over his face. I knew you'd understand. He walked over, reaching out to stroke my hair. I turned my head, pulling away from his touch. His hand froze in midair, but he didn't seem to care. Monica's been under a lot of pressure at work lately, and she's been really down. I just want to take her out to clear her head, he muttered, almost as if saying it out loud would absolve him of breaking his promise to me. You stay home and get some rest. Don't overthink it. Right then, his phone screen lit up. A FaceTime request popped up. The screen flashed Monica's name, complete with a cheeky heart emoji. Louis's eyes instantly softened. Before taking his call, he casually tossed out, Monica said you can just email that work straight to her boss when you're done. Oh, and don't forget to pack my bags for the World Cup. And iron my shirts, I need them for tomorrow. Like I was just his assistant. He was so used to me taking care of everything, making his life completely effortless. But not this time. I was done being an idiot. Before I could even say no, he walked straight into his study and shut the door behind him. I glanced at the flight confirmation on my phone. Departure time tomorrow. I was a freelance designer. I could live anywhere. The only reason I stayed in New York was Louis, and now, that reason was gone. Walking past the study door, I heard Monica's sickly sweet voice. Louis, are you really sure you want to go to the World Cup with me? Is Skyler going to be mad at me? If she's upset, I can just watch it by myself. Don't be silly. She's not mad. Skyler's been with me for 12 years. She knows how things work, and she can't leave me anyway. Besides, which World Cup haven't I watched with you? She's used to it. Don't worry, she won't make a fuss. Just pack your bags, I'm definitely going with you. I stopped in my tracks outside the door. So that was it. From 18 to 30. My unreserved devotion, my endless compromises. In his eyes, they were just capital that allowed him to hurt me without consequence. In that moment, the very last shred of affection I had for him evaporated. I tore the apartment apart, but I couldn't find the necklace my grandmother left me before she died. It was the only memento I had left of her. Forcing down my rising panic, I walked out of the bedroom and looked at Louis. Did you see the sapphire necklace I kept in my vanity drawer? Louis was lounging on the sofa, scrolling through his phone. He didn't even look up, his tone entirely nonchalant. Oh, that. Monica was over the other day and thought it was pretty, so I let her borrow it for a few days. My blood instantly ran cold. When was she at our place? My voice trembled slightly. I was a neat freak and hated people touching my personal belongings. Louis had explicitly promised me he would never bring anyone back to our apartment. Last week, when you were out with a client, she got drunk, and I didn't feel right leaving her alone, so I let her crash here. Louis seemed to finally remember his promise and gave me an apologetic, coaxing smile. I swear it was just this once. If this were the past, I would have blown up and started a massive fight. But right now, all I could think about was that necklace. I shot him a flat stare, grabbed my car keys without a word, and walked out, slamming the door behind me. Half an hour later, I knocked on the door of Monica's apartment. She opened it, covering her mouth in exaggerated surprise. Skyler? What are you doing here? She stepped aside to let me in, slipping into the kitchen to pour water, while quickly tapping away on her phone. I guess she was texting Louis to tattle on me, but I didn't care. I'm here to get my necklace, I said, standing in the middle of her living room, my voice ice cold. Monica walked over with a glass of water and sighed. Louis is just impossible. He always treats my place like it's his own. She pointed to an open bottle of whiskey on the counter. A few days ago, he was in a bad mood and insisted he could only cheer up if he hung out with me. I stayed up talking with him all night. I was exhausted. I spotted one of Louis's favorite suit jackets draped casually over her sofa. Catching my gaze, Monica rolled her eyes playfully and put on an apologetic face. Oh, sorry, Skyler, I didn't mean to imply that Louis isn't happy with you. But honestly, you are a bit too controlling. Louis mentions all the time that being with you makes him feel suffocated. I just stood there, quietly watching her put on her little show. Seeing I wasn't reacting, Monica looked a bit put out. Come on in and get it, she said, turning toward her bedroom. I followed her. As we passed the bathroom, the door was half open. On the sink, lined up perfectly, were 2 matching toothbrushes and a pair of couple's towels. Sorry, it's a bit messy. Monica followed my line of sight and giggled behind her hand. Louis crashes here so often, I just got him his own set of stuff. You know how he is, he's picky about his bed and his things. My heart completely hit rock bottom. For the past year, Louis kept saying the company was busy, that he had business trips or overnight meetings at the office. Turns out, all those nights he didn't come home, he was right here in this apartment, using his designated toothbrush, spending the night with Monica. But I didn't freak out or get jealous the way Monica was clearly hoping I would. I just gave a flat, okay. My total indifference made the smile freeze on Monica's face, a flash of frustration crossing her eyes. Where's the necklace? I demanded, staring her down. Monica bit her lip and walked over to an open suitcase by her closet. She crouched down and started digging through it. Right on top of her clothes were several sets of incredibly revealing, sexy lingerie, and scattered right next to them were a few individual condoms, already torn from their box. Monica looked up, meeting my eyes with a suggestive smirk. Might need these when we go watch the World Cup. Unfortunately for her, I genuinely did not care what kind of wild nights she and Louis had planned. I looked at her, my voice as steady as ever. Give me back the necklace. A flash of pure annoyance crossed Monica's eyes. She stood up, begrudgingly walked over to her vanity, and pulled open a drawer. It was stuffed full of expensive jewelry, sparkling under the lights. Louis bought me all of these. Monica trailed her fingers over a diamond bracelet, her voice dripping with superiority. He got me this for my birthday the year before last. I thought it was too expensive, but you know what Louis said? He said as long as I like it, he'll buy it for me. And this one, he gave me this last year. Seeing that I was still completely unfazed, she smiled and raised an eyebrow. Actually, all those holiday gifts he gives you? I picked those out for him. After all, my place in his heart isn't something just anyone can replace. Looking at her smug, provoking face, my mind drifted back 12 years. It was the first time Louis and I watched the World Cup together at home. He had invited Monica over. They chatted the whole night, while I sat there feeling like an intruder crashing their private date. But I didn't want to make a scene, so I swallowed it all down. That was, until the Argentine team Louis was rooting for scored a goal. Monica excitedly threw herself into his arms and planted a huge kiss on his cheek. Louis caught her naturally, his expression a mix of helplessness and total indulgence. They looked like a real couple. I lost my temper on the spot and kicked Monica out. That night, Louis apologized to me. But from that day forward, he never watched another soccer game with me again. I should have known right then that in Louis's heart, I would never compare to Monica. It's just a shame it took me 12 years to figure it out. I was done watching Monica's one-woman show. My patience had completely run out. Monica, your bragging means absolutely nothing to me, I said, looking at her coldly. Since you love recycling trash so much, you can have Louis. Now give me the necklace. Monica's face went through shades of green and white. Gritting her teeth, she dug the sapphire necklace out from the bottom of her jewelry box. "Take it," she snapped, holding it out. Just as my fingers were about to brush the metal, Monica suddenly let go. Crack. The necklace hit the hardwood floor. That brilliant blue sapphire cracked right down the middle, a glaring, ugly fracture ruining it completely. "Oops, my bad." Monica covered her mouth, her tone half innocent, half taunting. My hand slipped. "Don't be mad, I'll just have Louis buy you a new one." I stared dead at the broken necklace on the floor. That was the last thing my grandmother left me. The blood rushed to my head, and every ounce of suppression I'd held onto exploded. I raised my hand and slapped Monica across the face as hard as I could. "You did that on purpose," I screamed. Monica's head snapped to the side. She let out a shriek, her eyes instantly welling with tears. "Skyler, are you crazy?" A furious roar came from behind me. The apartment door was thrown open. Louis barged in and immediately pulled Monica into his arms, shielding her. He glared at me with absolute rage, looking at me like I was a hysterical madwoman. "It's just a cheap necklace. Did you really have to hit her?" Louis spat, tenderly touching Monica's red, swollen cheek. I looked at the two of them clinging to each other, my eyes red with fury. I took a step forward, raised my hand, and slapped Louis right across the face with a resounding smack. "Yes, I did," I screamed at him. "Louis, I regret ever loving you for the last 12 years. While Louis was still stunned by the blow, I picked up the broken necklace from the floor, turned around, and marched out of the apartment. I could hear Louis angrily shouting behind me, but I didn't even look back. Early the next morning, sitting in the back of a cab heading to the airport, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Monica. It was an Amazon link for a $19.99 knockoff sapphire necklace. Attached was a taunting message. "So sorry. I guess this cheap piece of junk will have to do as compensation." Right after, a message from Louis popped up. "You were completely out of line last night. We'll talk when you've calmed down in a few days. I'll be back in New York on the 9th of next month, and we'll go get our marriage license then." Staring at the words on the screen, I actually let out a cold laugh. "Louis, I don't care who you watch the World Cup with anymore. And I'm certainly not marrying you." Louis's POV. On the afternoon of the 8th, Louis and Monica arrived back in New York. Sitting in the back of the cab heading into the city, Louis unlocked his phone and opened his chat with Skyler. The last message was from 10 days ago, his cold, commanding, "We'll go get our marriage license." Skyler hadn't replied. Louis tapped the screen and sent a text. "I'm on my way home. Miss you." Silence. Louis tossed his phone aside, completely unbothered, and rubbed his temples. He and Monica had a great time on their 10-day World Cup trip. As far as he was concerned, Skyler's little explosion in the apartment was just a woman throwing a tantrum because she felt insecure. Once they went to City Hall tomorrow and got their marriage certificate, everything would go back to normal. He was planning to take Skyler to the south of France for their honeymoon, her favorite place. He knew once she heard the news, she would throw herself into his arms in excitement. He knew Skyler too well. She had loved him for 12 years. There was no way she would actually leave him. All he had to do was lower his head a little and coax her, and she'd come right back to him, as obedient as ever. Sitting next to him, Monica stared out the window, her face dark and miserable. Over the past 12 years, every time Louis brought up marriage, she had managed to talk him out of it with seemingly well-meaning excuses. "Getting married too early ruins your freedom. Who's going to hang out with me when you're married? I'll be so lonely." In the past, Louis had always reluctantly agreed. But this time, no matter how much she hinted, Louis refused to budge. "We're 30 now. I can't make Skyler wait any longer." Louis's words had been like a needle to Monica's heart. During their 10-day trip, Monica had worn every piece of sexy lingerie she packed. She even knocked on his hotel room door late at night, pretending to be drunk, trying to initiate something. But Louis held his boundary. He just walked her back to her room without a single extra word. Monica was furious. Over the 10 days, she had secretly sent Skyler countless provocative texts, even taking photos of Louis while he was asleep and sending them, hoping to mentally break Skyler and force her to call off the wedding. But all those messages vanished into a black hole. Not a single reply. The cab pulled up to their apartment building. Louis pushed the door open, fully expecting to see Skyler's silhouette bustling around in the kitchen. Instead, the apartment was dead silent. No smell of dinner cooking. No warm lights turned on. Louis changed his shoes, walked into the living room, and casually ran a finger across the coffee table. A thin layer of dust coated his fingertip, which meant no one had been living in this apartment for the last 10 days. "Skyler?" Louis frowned, calling out. Silence. A sudden, inexplicable wave of panic washed over him. Did something happen to her? He immediately pulled out his phone and dialed her number. "Sorry, the number you have dialed is powered off." Louis refused to give up, calling over a dozen times, but he only got the cold, automated voice. Monica, trailing behind him, saw this and couldn't hide the gleam of joy in her eyes. She stepped forward, pretending to comfort him by rubbing his back. Louis, don't worry too much, Monica purred, feeding the flames. Skyler's probably just jealous that we went to the World Cup together. She's throwing a fit and ran away from home just to get your attention. She's 30 years old. Why does she still act like a little girl throwing tantrums? Hearing this, Louis's frown relaxed slightly. Maybe Monica was right. Skyler just wanted to see him panic. Right then, Monica's phone started ringing. It was her boss. Monica quickly fixed her expression and answered. Boss, is there something? Before she could finish, her boss's harsh voice blasted through the speaker. Monica, don't bother coming into the office. You failed to submit the design proposal on time, and we lost a major client. You're fired. The silence following the speakerphone's abrupt disconnect was deafening. Monica stood frozen in the middle of the dark living room, her face pale, the phone still clutched tightly against her ear, as if hoping her boss would call back and laugh, claiming it was all a bad joke. She didn't send it? Louis asked, his voice low, a strange edge creeping into his tone. Skyler didn't send the design proposal? She must have forgotten, Monica stammered, turning around, her voice rising in frantic panic. Louis, you heard him. He fired me. He actually fired me. You have to do something. Call him. Tell him Skyler had a family emergency. Or something. Louis didn't move. He stood looking at the blank wall, his brow heavily furrowed. Skyler never forgot. In 12 years, Skyler had managed his calendar, organized his business trips, remembered his mother's medical appointments, and handled every favor he had ever dumped on her plate. She was meticulous to a fault. She didn't forget, Louis whispered, the realization settling into his chest like a cold lead weight. He walked past Monica, ignoring her protests as she grabbed at his sleeve, and marched toward the master bedroom. He threw the door open. At first glance, everything looked normal. The bed was neatly made, just as he liked it. But when he walked over to the built-in wardrobe and pulled open the double doors, his breath caught in his throat. Half the closet was empty. Not just empty in a she packed for a short trip way. Her winter coats, her custom-tailored dresses, her favorite cashmere sweaters, all gone. The velvet hangers hung bare, swaying slightly in the draft created by the open door. Panicking now, Louis rushed to her vanity. The brass drawer handles felt freezing cold under his trembling fingers. He yanked them open one by one. Her skincare products were gone. Her sketchbooks were gone. The small, silver-framed photograph of her grandmother that had sat on her nightstand for 12 years was gone. What is happening? Louis muttered, his hands shaking as he pulled out the bottom drawer. There, resting alone in the far corner, was a crumpled piece of white paper. He snatched it up and smoothed it out against his knee. It was the preliminary registration form for their marriage license, stamped by the New York City Marriage Bureau. Across the top, written in bold, clean red ink, was a single word stamped by an administrator, cancelled. Below it was Skyler's elegant signature, dated 10 days ago, the very morning he had left for the World Cup with Monica. No, 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 Louis breathed, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. This isn't right. She was just mad about the necklace. She was just throwing a fit. Louis. Monica burst into the bedroom, tears streaming down her face, ruining her expensive mascara. Are you listening to me? My career is over. You promised me you'd take care of this proposal if you hadn't given it to Skyler. Shut up, Monica. Louis roared, whipping around. Monica flinched, taking a sharp step back. In 12 years, Louis had never raised his voice at her. Not once. He had always been the gentle, indulgent, older brother figure, always ready to protect her, always taking her side. What did you say to her? Louis demanded, stepping toward her, his eyes wild. The night before we left. When she went to your apartment to get her necklace. What did you say to her? I didn't say anything. Monica squeaked, her eyes darting nervously toward the floor. She was the one who was crazy. She slapped me, Louis. You saw my face. She knocked over her own necklace and then blamed it on me. She canceled the wedding, Monica? Louis shouted, holding up the stamped paper, his voice cracking. She packed her entire life and left. Do you think a woman leaves a 12-year relationship over a dropped necklace? He turned around and began kicking open the trash cans in the room, searching for any clue, any note, anything she might have left behind. In the small wastebasket beside her desk, he spotted a handful of torn metallic glitter paper. He fell to his knees, his hands frantically gathering the tiny pieces, piecing them together like a agonizing jigsaw puzzle on the hardwood floor. When the text lined up, his blood dried up completely. It was a pair of Category 1 VIP match tickets for the World Cup final in Qatar. And on the back, written in Skyler's delicate script, was a short note. Happy 12th anniversary, Louis. Let's watch our team win together. The timestamp printed on the digital voucher receipt beneath it was 3 weeks ago. She had bought them for him. She had spent tens of thousands of dollars to secure the exact seats he had been dreaming about for 4 years. She had planned to surprise him, and he had spent that exact night telling his friends that watching soccer with her was boring, and that he was taking Monica instead. The pieces of paper fluttered from Louis's numb fingers. He sat back on his heels in the silent bedroom, the room suddenly feeling vast, freezing, and suffocatingly empty. Morning light broke over Manhattan, but Louis hadn't slept a single second. He sat on the couch, the apartment still smelling faintly of Skyler's signature lavender perfume, though it was rapidly fading, replaced by the stale air of a home long abandoned. Monica had left in a huff the night before after Louis refused to comfort her or help her contact her boss. She had slammed the door, shouting that he was an ungrateful bastard. For the first time in his life, Louis hadn't run after her. He hadn't even cared. At 8 a.m. sharp, Louis dialed Marcus, his best friend, the one he had been talking to in the hallway the day Skyler overheard them. Louis? Hey man, thought you were still in Qatar. Marcus answered, his voice groggy. Marcus, where is she? Louis asked immediately, his voice hoarse from crying and exhaustion. Do you know where Skyler went? Has she called you? Has she talked to Sarah? A heavy silence stretched over the line. Marcus, answer me. Louis pleaded. You really don't know, do you? Marcus said, his tone shifting from sleepiness to a cold, disgusted bite. You honestly have no idea what you did. I made a mistake, okay? Louis yelled into the phone, grabbing his hair with one hand. I should have taken her to the World Cup. I know, but she's overreacting. She canceled our marriage registration, Marcus. She packed her things and vanished. Overreacting. Marcus let out a dry, bitter laugh. Louis, you idiot. Do you know why Skyler turned down the Milan Fashion Week showcase 2 months ago? Louis blinked. What? What showcase? The Brandy Atelier Spring Collection, Marcus snapped. It's the holy grail for independent textile designers. They offered her a lead creative director role in Milan, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And do you know why she turned it down? Because you told her you couldn't leave New York, and she didn't want to do a long-distance marriage. Louis felt as if someone had punched him square in the solar plexus. She never told me that. Because she didn't want you to feel guilty. Marcus shouted through the phone. She chose you over her dream. And what did you do? You overheard her turn it down, and then you turned around and told me that watching the World Cup with her was boring. You gave her ticket to Monica. Marcus. She was standing right around the corner, Louis, Marcus said, delivering the final blow with surgical precision. When I called you a dick, she was standing right behind the door. She heard every single word you said. Louis's phone almost slipped from his sweaty palm. She heard it. Every dismissive chuckle, every arrogant remark about how she was used to it, how she couldn't leave him anyway. She had heard it all. Where is she now, Marcus? Please. Just tell me where she is. I'll go to her. I'll get down on my knees, I'll beg. She took the Milan contract, Louis. Marcus interrupted coldly. The moment she left your apartment 10 days ago, she signed the contract, packed her bags, and caught a flight to Italy. She's gone. And if you have even a tiny shred of respect left for the girl who wasted 12 years of her life on you, you will leave her the hell alone. The line went dead. Louis sat motionless, the phone pressing against his ear, emitting a low, rhythmic beep. Milan. She wasn't in her hometown, taking a breathing break. She wasn't hiding out at a friend's apartment waiting for him to send flowers. She had left the country. She had reclaimed the dream she had buried for his sake. A surge of desperate denial flooded Louis's veins. No, it couldn't end like this. They had 12 years of history. You don't just erase 12 years because of a few mistakes. He grabbed his coat and car keys and drove like a maniac to City Hall. It was September 9th, the exact date they were supposed to stand before the justice of the peace and exchange their vows. He rushed into the grand, marble-floored lobby of the marriage bureau, his hair disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. He shoved his way to the front desk. I need to check a reservation, he panted out to the middle-aged clerk behind the glass. Louis Vance and Skyler Chin. Today 11 a.m. The clerk typed slowly on her keyboard, her eyes scanning the monitor. Looked up, her expression completely indifferent. That appointment was cancelled 10 days ago, sir. Is there any way to reinstate it? Louis begged, leaning over the counter, his hands trembling. Can I pay a fee? I'm the groom. I'm here. If she comes. Sir, the bride herself walked in here on the 29th of last month, the clerk said flatly. She handed over the paperwork, surrendered her deposit, and formally removed her name from the registry. She left a note on the digital file too. What note? Louis gasped. tears finally spilling over his lashes. What did it say? The clerk pivoted her screen slightly and read off the text. Applicant explicitly requests that no rescheduling or secondary filing under these names be permitted. Case permanently closed. Louis collapsed against the wooden barrier of the counter, his knees giving out. Case permanently closed. Not delayed. Not postponed. Closed. Thousands of miles away, in a sun-drenched studio in the heart of Milan's fashion district, the air smelled of pure silk, dye baths and fresh espresso. Skyler stood before a tall mannequin, her fingers skillfully pinning a swath of emerald green velvet across its torso. Her long hair was pulled up into a sleek, professional bun, revealing the delicate column of her neck. She looked lighter. The shadows that had permanently rested beneath her eyes for the past 3 years in New York were completely gone. On the workbench beside her lay a small, black velvet box. Inside it sat her grandmother's sapphire necklace. It was no longer broken. Skyler had taken it to a master goldsmith in Florence during her first week in Italy. Instead of trying to hide the deep crack across the center of the stone, the artisan had used the ancient Japanese technique of kintsugi, filling the fracture with liquid 24-karat gold. Now, the brilliant blue gem was divided by a striking, glittering vein of pure gold. It was flawed, yet infinitely more beautiful and resilient than it had been before. Skyler, the board is ready for the preliminary review of the spring collection. A young Italian assistant called out from the doorway, looking at her with evident admiration. Maestro Brandy is asking for you. I'll be right there, Elena, Skyler replied with a warm, confident smile. She picked up the velvet box, lifted the necklace, and clasped it around her own neck. The cool metal and smooth stone rested perfectly against her collarbone. For 12 years, she had tailored her life to fit into the margins of Louis's world. She had cooked his meals, tolerated his childhood friends' constant encroachments, swallowed her pride and suppressed her ambition, all because she believed that love meant enduring discomfort for the sake of stability. How foolish she had been. Leaving New York hadn't killed her. In fact, the moment the airplane wheels had lifted off the tarmac at JFK, a feeling of immense, intoxicating freedom had washed over her. She hadn't cried once during the 8-hour flight across the Atlantic. In Milan, her talent was celebrated, not taken for granted. Maestro Brandy, a legend in the haute couture world, had treated her vision with immense respect, granting her complete creative control over the upcoming showcase. She walked out of her studio and into the grand conference room, where the executive team of Brandy Atelier sat waiting. Skyler. Maestro Brandy, a silver-haired man with sharp, discerning eyes, rose from his seat and applauded gently. The sketches for the Rebirth line. Exquisite. Absolutely exquisite. I hear your former associates in America are frantically trying to reach you. Some fashion houses in New York realized too late what a gem they lost. Skyler smiled serene, adjusting the cuffs of her crisp white shirt. The past is just draft paper, Maestro, she said smoothly, sitting at the head of the table. We only published the final design. Back in New York, Louis's life was rapidly disintegrating into chaos. Without Skyler to manage his household and subtle administrative tasks, his life turned into a comedy of errors that quickly ceased to be funny. He missed important client dinners because Skyler was no longer there to put calendar alerts on his phone. His dry cleaning piled up. He showed up to a high-level corporate presentation wearing a shirt with a stained collar because he hadn't noticed it in the dim lighting of his messy bedroom. Worse still was Monica. Having been fired from her design agency, Monica had lost her visa sponsorship and was facing potential deportation if she couldn't secure another job within 60 days. Because Louis was her only wealthy, influential connection, she practically moved into his apartment uninvited, constantly crying, complaining, and demanding that he use his contacts to find her a new position. Louis, you have to talk to your uncle, Monica whined one evening, barging into his study while he was staring blankly at a photograph of Skyler from 4 years ago. He's on the board at Hudson Creative. Just tell him to give me a senior designer role. Louis slowly looked up at her. Without the soft, nostalgic lens of his childhood memories, and without Skyler standing beside him as a contrast, he was finally seeing Monica for who she truly was. She was loud, selfish, demanding, and utterly devoid of real design talent. You got fired because you didn't do your job, Monica, Louis said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. You relied on Skyler to do your work for years. You stole her ideas, you wore her down, and I enabled you. Monica's jaw dropped. What are you talking about? I'm your best friend. Skyler was just a jealous bitter. Get out, Louis interrupted. What? Get out of my apartment, Louis snapped, standing up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. Get your things and get the hell out of my house. Louis, you can't be serious. Monica shrieked. her face twisting into a furious scowl. I'm the one who stayed by your side. I went to the World Cup with you. We've known each other since we were 6 years old. And that was my biggest mistake. Lewis yelled, grabbing her designer handbag and shoving it into her arms. I ruined my life for you. I destroyed the only woman who ever truly loved me because I was too stupid to see that you were using me as an ego boost. Leave. He dragged her to the front door and pushed her into the hallway, slamming the heavy oak door in her face. Monica pounded on the door for half an hour, screaming insults threatening to ruin his reputation, until the building security arrived and escorted her off the premises. The apartment went quiet again. Lewis slid down the back of the door, placing his face in his hands, sob after agonizing sob tearing through his chest. He had lost his fiancé. He had ruined his friendship. And worst of all, he knew, with absolute brutal clarity, that he deserved every single second of this misery. 2 days later, Lewis bought a one-way ticket to Italy. The grand salon of the Palazzo Lombardia was filled to capacity. Flashbulbs popped like starlight against the mirrored walls as billionaire collectors, global fashion editors, and international celebrities filled the front rows of the Brandy Atelier Spring-Summer Collection runway. Skyler stood backstage, overseeing the final adjustments on the lead model. The theme of her collection was resilience. The garments were masterpieces of architecture and flowing fabric, structured silks giving way to soft iridescent chiffons trimmed with delicate threads of real gold. 3 minutes to showtime, Miss Chun, the stage director announced into his headset. Skyler took a deep breath, feeling a cool, profound surge of adrenaline. This was her moment. The culmination of a decade of hidden hard work, finally stepping into the light that belonged to her. Outside in the lobby, a commotion was brewing. Sir, you cannot enter without an invitation card. An Italian security guard insisted, pushing back against a man who looked like he hadn't slept or shaved in a week. I need to see her. She's my fiancé. Lewis shouted desperately, trying to shove past the barrier. He was wearing a rumpled designer suit, his necktie crooked, his eyes bloodshot and wide with manic desperation. He had spent 3 days searching every hotel and studio in Milan until he caught wind of the Brandy showcase. Sir, step back or we will call the police. From inside the auditorium, the lights dimmed, and dramatic, sweeping orchestral music began to play. The crowd went hushed. Lewis managed to slip past the distracted guard during a swell in the music, bursting into the back row of the main hall just as the first model stepped onto the runway. He froze. The collection was breathtaking. Even a man who knew nothing about high fashion could feel the raw, transcendent emotion woven into every dress. And as the final look was presented, a stunning, crimson gown featuring a golden fracture design across the heart, the entire room erupted into a standing ovation. Brava! Brava! The crowd cheered. Maestro Brandy stepped onto the runway, holding out his hand to pull the lead designer into the spotlight. Skyler walked out. The spotlight hit her, illuminating her glowing skin, her serene smile, and the sapphire and gold necklace sparkling proudly against her chest. She looked ethereal, powerful, and entirely untouchable. The crowd rose to their feet, applauding wildly for Milan's newest star. Lewis stood in the dark back row, tears streaming silently down his cheeks. She looked so breathtaking, but she also looked like a complete stranger. Where was the quiet girl who used to sit on the edge of his couch, quietly waiting for him to finish his calls? Where was the woman who had compromised her sleep to iron his shirts and fix Monica's mistakes? She had never belonged in his small, selfish shadow. She had belonged here all along. When the show concluded and the crowd began moving toward the champagne reception, Lewis bypassed the guests and forced his way into the backstage holding area. Skyler, he cried out. Skyler was talking with a high-profile editor from Vogue Paris when she heard the familiar, breathless voice. She turned around slowly. Her Italian bodyguards immediately stepped forward to block Lewis, but Skyler gently raised her hand, indicating for them to stand down. Lewis stumbled toward her, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Skyler! Oh God, Skyler! He sobbed, reaching out his hands as if to touch her, but stopping inches away, terrified she would disappear. I found you. I searched everywhere for you. Skyler looked at him. There was no anger in her eyes. No hatrith. No passion. There was only a vast, terrifying expanse of absolute indifference. Hello, Lewis, she said, her voice smooth and even. Skyler, please listen to me. Lewis pleaded, dropping to one knee right there on the backstage floor, uncaring that models and crew members were staring at him in shock. I was wrong. I was an idiot, a blind, arrogant fool. I kicked Monica out of my life, Skyler. She's gone. I realized everything she did. Everything I did to you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, red velvet ring box he had carried for 3 years but never had the courage to officially present. Marry me, he wept, holding up a massive, flawless diamond ring. We can get married here in Italy. Tomorrow. Right now. I'll move to Milan. I'll quit my job. In New York. I'll do whatever you want. Just please come back to me. I can't live without you. Skyler looked down at the glittering diamond ring, then looked down at the kneeling man who had once held her entire heart in the palm of his hand. 12 years. She had waited 12 years for him to look at her with this much devotion. She had cried millions of tears praying for him to prioritize her over the rest of the world. And now that it was finally happening, she felt nothing. Not a single spark. Get up, Louis, Skyler said softly. You're ruining your suit. Not until you say yes. Louis begged, tears soaking into his collar. Skyler, we have 12 years together. You can't just throw 12 years away. I didn't throw 12 years away, Louis, Skyler replied, her voice echoing with absolute clarity throughout the room. You threw them away. Every single time you chose Monica, you threw a piece of us away. Every broken promise, every dismissed tear, every time you told me I was too sensitive, you were throwing us away. I was wrong. I swear I've changed. You didn't change because you realized my worth, Louis, Skyler said, taking a step backward, stepping cleanly out of his reach. You changed because you lost your comfort zone. You lost the woman who made your life easy while demanding nothing in return. She reached up and touched the golden vein on her sapphire necklace. 12 years ago, I thought love meant giving up parts of myself until you had enough to feel whole, Skyler continued gently. Now I realize that true love doesn't demand sacrifice, it inspires growth. I don't hate you, Louis, but I don't love you anymore. In fact, I don't feel anything for you at all. Louis stared up at her, his jaw trembling, his soul shattering into a million irreparable pieces. Indifference. The opposite of love wasn't hate. It was indifference. And Skyler looked at him with the exact same emotion one might give to a stranger on a crowded subway train. Goodbye, Louis, Skyler said quietly. She turned around, her crimson dress billowing gracefully around her heels, and walked toward Maestro Brandy and the waiting cameras. Louis reached out a hand, his fingers clutching at the empty air, but the guards stepped firmly into his path, blocking his view of her completely. 1 year later, the autumn air in New York was crisp and cold. Louis sat alone in a dark corner of a high-end bar in Manhattan, a half-empty glass of scotch resting between his hands. His life had spiraled continuously over the past 12 months. Distracted by his depression and obsession with Skyler, he had made several severe errors at his financial firm, leading to his demotion. He had lost his senior partnership track. His spacious apartment, once so warm and inviting when Skyler lived there, was now a cold, cluttered mess that he rarely spent time in. He couldn't sleep in the master bedroom anymore. The faint scent of her lavender perfume seemed to haunt the walls, reminding him every second of what he had destroyed. Monica was gone too. Having been unable to find a sponsor, she had been forced to leave the country months ago, her reputation in the local design community completely destroyed after her former agency leaked proof of her plagiarism and missed deadlines. Louis looked up at the wall-mounted television screen above the bar. The news channel was broadcasting a segment on international art and culture. And in fashion news today, celebrated creative director Skyler Chen has officially opened her flagship atelier in Paris, following the massive global success of her autumn line. On the screen, a clip played. Skyler was stepping out of a vintage limousine outside a grand building on the Champs-Élysées. She was radiant, dressed in an impeccably tailored navy suit, smiling warmly as photographers clamored to capture her image. Beside her stood a handsome, distinguished Italian architect, her business partner and close companion, a man who looked at her not with arrogant possession, but with deep, visible reverence and awe. The reporter continued, when asked in a recent interview about the secret behind her incredible resilience and creative breakthrough, Ms. Chen had only one thing to say. The screen cut to a close-up of Skyler's face during a press conference. Her sapphire and gold necklace sparkled brightly beneath the studio lights. I stopped asking for permission to be loved, Skyler said into the microphone, her eyes clear and shining with absolute peace. And I started loving myself first. In the dark corner of the Manhattan bar, Louis stared at the screen. He raised his glass of scotch in a silent, agonizing toast, tears slipping quietly into his drink. She had soared to the highest heights of the world, leaving her gold-stitched mark on history, and he was left sitting alone in the dark, forever trapped in the echo of the love he had thrown away.